Sandu in for Director McGonigal from Lake Cowichan. Good morning and welcome. I don't see Director Sandu here yet, but she'll be coming. With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is the approval of the agenda that's before us. Does anybody have any late items to add to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion that we adopt the agenda as circulated. Moved and seconded. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 2 is adoption of the minutes of the Committee of Whole meeting of April 27th, 2022, and the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 27th, 2022 be adopted.
Somebody want to make that motion? Moved, seconded by, thank you. Errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? And opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have no business arising from the minutes. We have no applicants for public input. So we move down to reports. And the first item is R1, report from the General Manager, Community Services regarding regional recreation, financial implications of facility use model.
All right, and there's a lengthy recommendation here that's part of the report. I'd like to turn to Mr. Elzinga because there's several hundred pages in our agenda. John, give us the Reader's Digest, if there is such a thing. Mr. Elzinga? Can't hear you, sir. Still can't hear you. Nothing there. And your block doesn't tell me you're muted, so there's some kind of a technical problem. Still nothing, Mr. Elzinga.
Area B is not working either.
Area B is not working either. Can I just run through everybody who's logged in remotely to see if we can hear them? Director Martman, can you test your microphone? Can't hear you. Director Salmon? No. Wilson? Actually, you show as muted, Mike. I see you waving.
I am here. Everybody can hear it.
Okay.
Everybody else.
Director Wilson's mic is working. Director Toporowski, unmute, please.
Hello?
Yep, you're there. Alternate Director Stevens.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you. Yana DiNardo, I know, is good because she's in the room here. Director Morrison, same thing. Director Marsh, we're just testing microphones. We seem to have some audio issues today.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm late. We had some signing in issues too on my end.
Okay.
I heard, I'm unmuted.
You're working. Thank you.
I just want to tell you, I heard Director Martman, but I didn't hear Director Salmon or Director Smith.
Wow.
And everyone else I heard.
Director Kuhn, you're muted.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm here.
Yep, we hear you. Director Staples.
Good morning.
Yep. Director Smith.
Here and accounted for.
Yep, we hear you. I'm going to go back to Mr. Elzinga to see if we can hear you now.
Good morning to the committee.
There we go. Okay, so just hold 1 second. I just want to test Martman and Salmon because they were the two that weren't working before. Director Martman again?
Testing.
Yes. And Director Salmon? Nope. Still nothing from Director Salmon. You're going to have to go through the meeting with sign language, or probably just log out and log back in. That's probably the best way to do it. All right, thank you. So we'll get back to business now that we've, Director Acton.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I had to sign out and then come back in because it wasn't originally working. But Mr. Chair, I wanted to, how many people are we missing? I don't think this has been a very, notified meeting that it started at 9. I have multiple different times sent to me, and we usually do start at 9:30. So I don't think it's fair that we've started. Who are we missing?
Everybody was notified, everybody's here, we have quorum, we can't, according to the procedure bylaw, we can't wait more than 15 minutes to start a meeting unless there's technical
Well, we
issues.
could wait 15 minutes then and notify people if we're missing that many people. This is a really important item.
But 15 minutes would be 9:15, not 9:30.
Sure, okay, 9:15, we could send messages to people if those are, if people are missing. This is a really important item.
You know,
All directors out.
I fully expect the discussion will take longer than 15 minutes. If folks log in at 9:30, they may be logging into the middle of the discussion, but I don't want to delay the start of the meeting. So I'm going to,
I move that we wait the 15 minutes, which gives us 5 more minutes.
pretty much everybody's here.
Director Nicholson's not here. Director Stone is not here. I haven't gone around to see who else
Director
is
Stone
here.
is represented by his alternate.
And I knew about it for starting at 9 o'clock. I think everybody else did. So let's get a move on, can we, please?
Yeah, let's get on with it.
All right. Mr. Elzinga, I'm going to turn to you. As I said right at the start, have you got a Reader's Digest version for the 400 pages that's in our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. So good morning to the committee. We're presenting 2 reports this morning to address the board's strategic priority of replacing an inequitable regional recreation funding model with an equitable regional recreation funding model. Specifically, the intent is for the board to consider both financial implications and advancing the initiative to the creation of a service establishment bylaw. Today is another milestone in the 6.5-year journey on the current project, noting that equitable recreation facility funding has been an issue for the Cowichan region for decades. As the journey has been that long, staff decided to provide you with considerable background and past decisions of the board. If you're simply looking for a snapshot of what the financial implications could be for individual jurisdictions under a new usage-based model, you'll find that in the bottom 3 rows of attachment F. This shows a currently pay line for each jurisdiction toward the 9 regionally significant facilities, which is actually based on the 2019 budget, a proposed pay line under a usage-based model, and the increase or decrease to that jurisdiction. The service establishment bylaw, however, must be written to reflect the maximum requisition residents would pay. And a reminder that the intent is to have the same maximum requisition. The model only affects which jurisdictions pay. Mr. Chair, there is no presentation this morning, and I think I'll stop there. I'm available to answer the questions I can, along with Ms. Weiner and Ms. Harrison.
I guess I would just start with just to set the stage. You talk about Appendix F and what the financial implications could be. Those were your words. That sounds like it could also not be that. Can you flesh that out a little bit?
So, Mr. Chair, every year is different. We had to provide the board with a snapshot of the financial implications. There were some implications presented to the board as part of the facility use study in 2017 as well, which are slightly different. And so in talking to the financial officers of the municipalities, the Sportsplex, and obviously the CVRD, we thought that the best snapshot would be the 2019 budget. However, every budget, as you all know, is affected by short-term borrowing, transfers to and from reserve for all of these facilities, as well as the capital projects in any given year. So this is a snapshot of 2019. We've also provided a spreadsheet called Attachment H to identify what the amounts would be under a maximum requisition under the Service Establishment Bylaw. We could be providing multiple snapshots. We left it there.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. I'll take questions. Director Wilson, then Marsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As usual, I'm not very good at following some of these spreadsheets, and I'm looking at the usage-based funding attachment F here, and in particular, obviously, I'm looking at Area C. So, Mr. Elzinga, explain this to me, because as you know, I'm a bit numbers limited here. So on Area C, Couch and Aquatic Centre, currently pay 26,000. Percentage of use, okay, 6.4%. Proposed dollar of current requisition, 185, and then there's 159. So one take away the other, get them to 26. Just explain to me what this actually means. I'm not sure exactly what I'm paying. Are we going to be paying less or are we going to be paying more per year?
Mr. Elzinga?
Mr. Chair, through to Director Wilson, this is a great example. So in those cells on attachment F, so I see that Area C currently pays $26,515. This is part of the $100,000 that is a contribution of the Couch and Aquatic Center through Function 417 through Kerry Park Recreation. Areas A, B, and C all share part of that $100,000. So based on the usage amounts presented by our consultant at the last Committee of the Whole meeting, the usage of Area C toward the Couch and Aquatic Center is 6.45%. Therefore, Area C could be paying 6.45% of the actual costs, which if you look on the Couch and Aquatic Center row all the way to the right, you will see an amount of 2.2881,707, which is the current requisition for the Couch and Aquatic Center. Area C would be paying 6.45% of that number. That equates to 185,870. So under the usage-based model, Area C would be paying $159,355 more for the Couch and Aquatic Center.
My goodness.
If you look down the list of facilities, you'll see that some facilities you'd be paying more and some you'd be paying less.
So I'm sorry to, so what I'm thinking there here, so at the moment we're paying 26,000, but you would now like us to pay 185,000. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, through to Director Wilson, that's correct for the Couch and Aquatic Center. I will direct Director Wilson to the Kerry Park Recreation Center, for instance, where using that same logic, you would be paying $206,797 less.
Okay, so let's go all the way down to the bottom there. Total. Sorry, Mr. Chair, follow up here because I need to know this. This is a big impact here. Total of all regional facilities, then we are going to be paying right. We currently pay. Okay, so we're going to be paying $268,000 per year more for Area C.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
At the end of the 3-year phase-in.
Yeah, but it's still $268,000. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Marsh, then Acton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Elzinga. And thank you, Mr. Elzinga, for the decades of work you've done on this. It's your defining time of your career, I think, really. I remember early on, we talked about making everyone pay. Everyone would contribute $200 to regional recreation. I think that got dropped. Do you recall that in a report many years ago?
Mr. Chair, through to Director Marsh, I don't remember that exact conversation, no.
Okay, it's in a long ago document and I couldn't find it, but I guess I just wanted to say to my fellow directors, there are many people who don't use any of these centers. I'm one of them. And there was at the board of the day the thought of having everyone contribute because this is our commons, if you will. And everyone was going to contribute the same amount. And so we're not doing it that way, obviously, but I just hope that directors will understand that it's important that if we're going to have a regional district and we're going to have these facilities, that everyone contributes in an amount that just reflects that it's not just on the actual area that's providing that service. So the 2 ice sheets, there's only 2. The pool, there's only 1. So if we could just look at it from a regional lens, I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. There's actually 3 ice sheets, Lake Cowichan, Fuller Lake, and the community center, but
I forgot about the community center.
but your point is taken. Mr. Elzinga.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was actually just going to clarify, there's actually 5 ice sheets in the Cowichan region, 4 subsidized by requisition. Kerry Park was included as well.
I forgot about Kerry Park.
Yeah. And there's 2 aquatic facilities, 2 major aquatic facilities.
All right.
Oh, what's the other aquatic facility?
Frank Jameson Community Center in Ladysmith.
Well, of course.
Director Acton, then Smith.
Thank you. I have a few questions. I guess I was really surprised when I asked the question this week about the commissions. My understanding is that all the electoral area directors really value the commissions and the public and the community's input. And to lose this, I understood that we were trying to find a model that would still incorporate that for the electoral areas. So is there any, and I'm all for equity, but for me, community comes before first. Is there any of the models that would still keep our commissions in place?
Mr. Elzinga, on the governance piece, it is complicated.
Mr. Chair, obviously what we're doing currently allows for commissions, and the principle behind multiple jurisdictions being on multiple commissions made it much more efficient just to have one standing committee of the board. I would have to research the individual models and their effect on governance regarding whether commissions could be permitted or not. I don't know that one.
I do recall reading in the report, Director Acton, that maintaining individual commissions for individual facilities would create a situation where, for example, Ladysmith, and I'm not going to crunch the numbers, but let's say Ladysmith has a 3% usage figure at Kerry Park. Well, based on that, they'd be entitled to a vote at the Kerry Park Recreation Commission for 3% usage. And so staff tried to get around that and said, let's just do one governance piece with a single committee. Now, I think what we may want to have a discussion about is what that committee looks like. Is it just the committee of the board, or do electoral area directors, for example, have the option of also appointing some community members to that committee, which makes it a much larger body, but might have some of that representation. Then again, the argument could be made that that's what electoral area directors are there for. They're elected by their community. So I don't know, but you had a follow-up question, Director Acton. Go ahead.
Well, so now you brought it up. There's one of the models talked about a little bit more about a sub-regional approach. So, to me, that would pave the way to keep the commissions in place. I guess I'll come back to that. I am extremely bothered by the fact that we would eliminate the commissions, and I hope that today we will end on not a split vote and forcing. And to me, that's forcing if we end at 8-7. So I really hope that we could come together and make this strong for everyone. And I do believe that we should have equity in the end, but I don't want to lose the commissions. So, but my question also is around incorporation, or another pool, like for example, a pool facility. The community is in discussions a little bit with the private schools of how we could share a facility, because it's always been something that the South has wanted. If that ever came to fruition, can we remove ourselves from the pool side of it, or how would that work?
Mr. Elzinga, there's a hypothetical. If we get a shared facility with one of the schools, what would that governance look like?
So there's 2 or 3 points I think in there, Mr. Chair. So this gives me the opportunity to talk about a new facility in relation to the funding model. So the intent is for the current facilities for the usage of those facilities. If a new facility, like an aquatic facility in the South End, was created, it would be under a traditional process where the partners in that area, perhaps A, B, C, I'm not sure, I don't want to speculate, would talk about whether they wanted to fund the construction and debt costs. And then after the building was built, there could be potentially another facility use analysis to see which other jurisdictions are using it, and they would contribute to the operating and ongoing capital of that facility. So that is possible. Obviously, in this model we have right now, there is municipal facilities included as well as regional district facilities. Director Acton, did I miss anything there?
Yeah, the piece about co-governance, if we do a partnership with one of the schools, would that just be a case of
No, I don't think that was it. That's fine.
Oh, okay,
I don't think
sorry.
we need to co-governance to figure that out. But I guess just incorporation, how that might affect the South, because it is an ongoing conversation that we have.
Mr. Elzinga, incorporation?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that because other incorporated areas of the region are contributing with their facilities, there would be potentially little effect, and it would be a separate decision.
Thank you. Director Wilson, I see you. I've got Director Smith next.
Thank you. I have quite a few questions, so I'll end up going back onto the list. Thank you very much. So just in discussion about the partnerships, I think that when you look at the Sportsplex, that is a partnership, and I'm not sure how that's going to actually fit into the governance model, as they have their own board. They're a private corporation society, and their own board makes their decisions. And how exactly would we, as the governance body, then indicate to them what they would be in regards to, if they make decisions to increase things, then we are just moved along in that direction. We don't really have a governance ability with that. So I would like to question that, as that is actually a partnership and not really a facility that's municipal or regional district. So I have that question. And I think that I hear Director Acton and her concerns. And one of the things, when you look through the regionally significant facilities, they all have either an aquatic center or they have a sheet of ice. And her community center doesn't have either of those. And so it seems like in the past, did that one just get popped in there as a community center? And should it actually have been in a regionally significant facility? Because maybe that it should have just stayed under the community like the other community centers are going to be. And so I'm just not sure how the Shawnigan Lake Community Center actually became a significant facility. I mean, it's significant for Shawnigan Lake and the areas down there, but it doesn't have a pool or a sheet of ice. So maybe those two questions would be to start with. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Elzinga, governance in the Sportsplex and the Shawnigan Lake Community Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Smith. So yes, Director Smith is entirely correct. The Sportsplex has a board and a society. I would suggest that this CVRD board has control over the requisition amounts and contributions to the Sportsplex. And that's really where the board would be providing the governance. So there has been decisions in the past on operating contributions to the Sportsplex. As is written in the report, there is the suggestion of up to $930,000 in capital requirements for the Sportsplex, potentially over the next 5 years. So that is included in the maximum requisition amount. That is not decided today. Those are future discussions of this board, not the Sportsplex board, whether they want to make those contributions or not. In the past, this board has decided on various capital items. I note a track replacement in 2017. Regarding the Shawnigan Lake Community Center, all I can say on that is that the board requested staff to come forward with the terms of reference in 2016. Staff did that, which did include the Shawnigan Lake Community Center at that time. The board approved that terms of reference, and staff have been working with those 9 regionally significant facilities ever since.
Thank you. We'll get back to you, Director Smith. You've let us know you had more questions. I have Wilson next, unless somebody who hasn't spoken yet raises their hand. Director Martman.
Thank you, and appreciate the detail in this. And I'm going to play the new guy card. But the one thing I was interested in was the small percentages that are related on the spreadsheet on attachment F. And I guess my question is around if something's under 1%, is that a valid number to be using and requesting funds from that area?
Mr. Elzinga.
Mr. Chair, a facility use analysis, as has been presented, is not a perfect instrument. It relies on statistical certainty. I believe it's 19 times out of 20, plus or minus 2%. And so that reflected all of the numbers in the spreadsheet, whether they were low or high. And so staff did not discriminate with any sort of low numbers. They were included in the spreadsheet based on a calculation of the usage amount and the numbers put forward by the financial officers.
Director Martman, follow up.
Thank you. So I guess I'm looking for staff's thoughts on what would be appropriate in terms of when you have something, for example, as 0.0 or 0.22%, 0.08%. It seems to me that I'm not sure those would be reflective over a 5 or even a rolling period. And should there be a cutoff of saying things, less than 1 or less than 2% should just be zeroed and not requisitioned? I'm not sure if there's thoughts on that.
Mr. Elzinga.
Mr. Chair, I'll share that in a previous recommendation to the board, I believe it was in 2019, we discussed that topic and raised that there could be potential around not factoring in any numbers below 2%. However, that was not approved by the board at that time, and we've moved forward with the numbers as presented.
Because keep in mind, Director Martman, that it may be 1.3% over here, but it may be something else over there, and you got to look at the total number, not the individual number for each particular facility. Is kind of how I would look at it. It's more the cumulative impact, and those little numbers work into the cumulative impact in one way or another. That would be my take on it. I think that's why the board decided not to set that low end threshold.
Yeah, the problem, if I may, Chair, the concern I have is that if you're doing a 5-year analysis and you're trying to rely on the statistics being relevant, numbers under, when there's a plus or minus 2%, then the numbers that are less than that are not statistically significant year to year, and so that becomes a problem, I think, if you're trying to include them. Anyway, thank you.
Well, point well taken. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just sitting here thinking about what we're, here to accomplish today. And, I understand that directors that haven't been here as long and through the process have, good legitimate questions like the last one we heard. And I guess a bit of a comment and then a question, Mr. Elzinga. I was under the impression we were gathering today that all the material that was provided, like we got a mouthful of it at our last meeting. We're getting the financial implications today, and we're moving towards. Are we putting this before the public as a board? Are we finally going to have this regional recreation question packaged in such a way that we can put it to the public? And I've been having phrases going through my mind like perfect is the enemy of good in this circumstance, that we could probably find small inconsistencies or small challenges or issues that we can take exception to, but in the grand scheme of things, we're here to decide, are we moving forward to put this before the public? I think that's what the purpose of today is. And what I'm going to suggest is that, in listening to the questions that have been posed before, they all sound very familiar, like they're issues that have been put before the board before, voted on and decided on. So can you, Mr. Elzinga, just confirm, what is staff looking for from us today? Is it the decision that we have a good package that we can take forward, that we can put before the public? Because I think if that isn't what we're supposed to be doing today, then we better schedule a day-long session to go over all of the decisions that we've already made. Because I think that where we're sitting is where the board has told you to go, and you're just providing us with that next step. So can you clarify for me, please?
There is a recommended motion on the agenda, Director Morrison, which kind of goes to what you're saying, but I'll turn to Mr. Elzinga for a response.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Morrison. So one potential correction to what Director Morrison said about having to decide today to put the question in front of the public, I would suggest the board's already made that decision as well. You have already provided direction that it will be part of a referendum in October of 2022. And so the next step in the process is for the establishment of a new bylaw. I will suggest that this has been an ongoing discussion for a long period of time. This time and in previous times, we have never been as close as we are today to moving things forward. I do agree with Director Morrison that it is not perfect, but it is a good model going forward, and it is based on all of the decisions that the board has made over the past 6.5 years. So I'm prepared to answer questions and try and direct the board toward their past decisions. What staff is looking for directly to Director Morrison is we're prepared to move ahead toward an equitable regional recreation facility funding model. The next step is a service establishment bylaw,
Which is the recommended motion. I've got Director Kuhn.
Yes, I'd like to back up to what Director Morrison said, and I fully agree with that. We've been working at this for a very long time. It's really quite simple, and the very simple expression of this all is what we're trying to get at is that everybody pays for whatever service they use, and it's that as far as I'm concerned is the simplest way of doing it. The past way of doing it, there were areas that paid for services that they didn't really use an awful lot. And there were other areas that used a lot of services and never paid for them. And we are trying to level it out in a way, if you want to use a service, you're going to have to pay for it. And yes, it'll increase some of the requisitions from some areas, and it'll decrease some of the others. But if you look at the logical conclusion, it's simply what an area or what the citizens of an area use. And if they use a certain service, they should pay for it. So that is actually the simplest way of dealing with the money. And I find it's a logical way of doing it. I mean, if I want to use a service, I know I have to pay for it. And if I try to get around it, well, then obviously I'm trying to force somebody else to pay for the service I'm using. And that obviously has been done in the past, and it doesn't work properly. So I'm fully in favor of this, and I would actually, I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation at this point.
Okay, the staff recommended motion is that it be recommended to the board on May 11, 22, that a new service establishment bylaw be prepared for a function that encompasses facility operation, maintenance, and condition-based renewal costs based on usage of the following regionally significant recreation facilities as part of the Regional Recreation Initiative, and then it lists the 9 facilities. Do I have a seconder for the motion? That's seconded, thank you. All right, anything else, Director Kuhn?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Director Yanni DiNardo, then I'm going to put myself on the list, and then potentially we'll start with round 2. I see you, Director Smith. You're on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also going to move the recommendation. We've directed staff. This has been a long haul. I appreciate for the people that are fairly new here that it seems like it's very complicated, and they are doing their job trying to protect their communities from taxes being raised. But this is something that is fair and equitable that we've worked on for a very long time. It doesn't do much for Area D. It is something that I have said from the beginning that I'm a regional thinker, and it just is a basic model that we need to move towards and finally maybe get this to rest. But we have told staff this is what we have. We now have it in front of us. We need to move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Before we go to round 2, I'm going to put myself on the list here. And, you know, there's a long history here. I was talking to, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Elzinga or Ernie Mansuetti or maybe both of them, but in some sense it could be argued that this discussion actually goes back 50 years. In terms of the construction of Fuller Lake Arena and how that was going to be paid for, and some of the stuff in Ladysmith. I mean, the whole concept of is recreation a regional piece, or is it a sort of piecemeal electoral area and municipal piece? You know, I will concede, because you can all see the numbers, North Cowichan is a winner in this. North Cowichan's a winner largely because of the Aquatic Center, which is widely used by a lot of people in a lot of different electoral areas and municipal jurisdictions. And yet, North Cowichan and to some degree Duncan are paying the lion's share of this thing. As you all remember, if you have memories that go back a few years, we went with a 2-tier admission system there, which was a nightmare for our staff to administer, and you know, they sustained a fair bit of abuse over that. So for that reason, primarily, North Cowichan Council said, you know what, we're going to pull back, and we had some agreements in place with a few of you in some of the electoral areas, and we thank you for that. Some of those agreements have expired, some are ongoing. There was an attempt in Area E to formalize something just for that area in a referendum. That failed. This plan, and you know, and I totally want to concur with what Director Kuhn said, this plan makes it fair. This plan says if there's folks in North Cowichan that are curling in Kerry Park, North Cowichan's going to pay a share of that Kerry Park requisition. If there's people in Lake Cowichan that are coming in to use the pool, so you know, Lake Cowichan's going to pay a small part of that. It's a fairness principle. I can recall, you know, when we were in the middle of some of these discussions, I think it was around 2011 maybe, and John will remember this, we had a report and we had the purple model and the blue model, and they were all different colors, and there was all kinds of different ideas being kicked around. And I don't know where I was at, AVICC or someplace, and I was talking to somebody from Nanaimo, from the city of Nanaimo, whether it was the mayor of the day or somebody else. And they said to me, Al, because they were going through the same issue with their new pool. And they said, we just did a usage analysis of the pool, and we're going to start requisitioning for the pool based on usage. And, we've done 2 studies, and they're both consistent, and we're pretty confident we have the numbers right, and that's the model. And I remember raising this, and again, whether it was with Elzinga or Mansuetti, I'm not sure, but I said, are we familiar with what they're doing in Nanaimo? And I got the impression that the Nanaimo thing was fairly recent and that staff hadn't actually dug into it as much as they could have, so they did. And I mean, I'm not in any way taking credit for what's before us here, but in my mind, that was part of the genesis of this whole usage-generated model, was what they did in Nanaimo. And it's been hugely successful. People there get it, they understand. And yes, to the EA directors, I understand there are requisition increases embedded in this for some of you. And I don't know what to say to that, except, you know what, that's what's fair. If this whole plan falls apart, I mean, I'm not going to be at the table in North Cowichan, but I can tell you that staff is scratching their heads going, do we have to go back to a 2-tier model for the pool? Because it's big money. And that's not a threat, that's just an administrative reality that is going to have to be on the table if we don't move this file forward in this fashion. So I'll leave it there. I've got Wilson, Smith, and Acton. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I fully understand the user pay, pardon me, concept. That's the fair way of doing it. I completely agree with that, and I know this has been in the pipeline for a long time here. And the questions I'm asking is purely so that I can measure the impact on my area and be able to explain it to the residents who are going to come forward and ask these questions.
Absolutely.
So they're not a question. It's not, I'm saying, look, I'm not going to do this. I'm saying, let me have some more information. And I'm sorry if this is leading up to something else. So question, I think, for finance is that what are we paying now? What's the overall percentage impact here on property taxes? What can I expect to see as a number so I can tell my my residents, this is what the overall impact on your property taxes will be. This is why we're doing it. And I need to be able to have that information. Hence, I'm asking these questions. Thank you.
Absolutely fair questions. Ms. Weiner, are you in the room?
Through the chair to Director Wilson, yes, they're great questions. The information for overall total CVRD requisition, as the numbers were in the budgets, were based on the 2019 budgets. That would have been overall requisition that would have been paid exactly what the taxpayers had paid. Now that this is being based on usage, and this information is from 2019, I can give. This is where the funding model comes into play, where which portion, because of the phase-in versus the not phase-in. I can't give a specific number for Area C just for the impact because this is based on usage. I can't just define for the one area.
Dr. Wilson?
Yeah, I fully understand that. Is there any kind of, sorry, Ms. Weiner, is there any kind of estimation on what the impact is going to be? Is it going to be another 2% on top of what we're looking at now? Another, I'm just looking for a number here, and I know that's a difficult question to ask, but I'm going to be asked that question, and I don't like putting my hand up and saying, I don't know because I didn't ask the question. So you're the, if you could, anything that is going to illuminate the problem I'm having right now.
Through the chair to Director Wilson, give me a couple of moments. I will see what I can do for a calculation based on user fees. I've done some of the rough ones by facility over the phase-in. And I do understand because for each area, it will be a different implication. I won't necessarily be able to give a percentage increase. This is the challenge that comes into it. We can't necessarily give a percentage increase for just that area because it's based on usage.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ms. Weiner.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Director Smith, then Acton.
Okay, I'm going to ask for some patience. I'm an area that has a bit of a kink in it with the Islands Trust. I know that it's based on usage, and I feel that that's great. I support that wholly. I think it was the best decision that we made along the way when it comes to the regionally significant recreation facilities. For Area G, the crinkle is when you look at the percentage of use by Islands Trust, it's 0.22%, which is below 1%. So if we look at the error factor, we don't need to go there. But when you add up the amount, if you look at the bottom of attachment F, it indicates around 4,800 for the Gulf Islands. But I know that staff is unable to divide out that amount from the amount that Saltaire pays. So the problem then becomes, if you add them together and it's based on assessment, the Gulf Islands of Area G are approximately 1/3 of our total assessment, which then means instead of the Gulf Islands paying $4,800, they would be paying approximately $66,000. That's a huge amount for a very 0.22 usage. So I really am unable to support moving forward for the Islands Trust Area G Gulf Islands, and I would like to make a friendly amendment, and I hope that you can support me. It's sort of a two-part amendment. Can I go ahead, Chair?
Well, you can certainly try. There's no such thing as a friendly amendment. It will require a seconder because this is a fairly major issue, but what would your amendments look like?
So my amendment under the recommended part is in it says Regional Recreation Initiative. I'd like to, number one, make a recommendation that it be changed to regionally significant recreation facilities.
I'm going to rule that one out of order because that's already in the motion. The following 9 regionally significant recreation facilities as part of the Regional Recreation Initiative. It's there already.
On the recommendation, I'm sorry, so there are 9 regionally significant recreation facilities,
Yeah.
but it's part of Regional Recreation Initiative. So if you read number 6, under number 6 on page 6,
Yeah.
it sort of indicates that we would need to make sure that it is, instead of part of regional recreation, that it be regionally significant recreation facilities. Because if you looked at regional recreation should include Honeymoon Bay Community Center, Yubo Community Center, and Saltaire's Community Center. That would
Point
be
of order.
regional recreation.
What's your point of order, Director
Well, I
Morrison?
think the chair's already ruled.
Well, I mean, we've already determined what the 9 regionally significant recreation facilities are. That was a previous decision of the board, and we're moving forward on that basis. So on that basis, I think this particular amendment is out of order.
Can we ask then, so under here, this option 2, it says with regional recreation facilities, we could term the new function regionally significant recreation facilities funding.
There's a motion on the table, and I don't believe it's option 2. So if you want to make an amendment to the existing motion that's on the table, I'd probably like to hear what that amendment would be specifically.
So I think it's the wording.
Well, that's what an amendment is wording. What kind of
Yes.
wording would you like instead?
Well, I would like to have it include the wording that is on page 6, where it indicates that we could term the new function regionally significant recreation facility funding. And but could no longer refer to the function as regional recreation.
All right. Director Elzinga, or Mr. Elzinga.
Mr. Chair, if I can maybe provide some assistance. So I haven't heard this specifically from Director Smith, but if she is looking to exclude Thetis Island from the regional formula, the implication of that is that we could no longer refer to this as a regional service. And regional service would not be used in the messaging going forward. So the decision is around whether Thetis Island is excluded or not. As per number 2 in that section 6, the language would fall out of that decision.
I see. So we're talking about option 2 in this section. And I'm just going to read from the report. One implication is this could no longer be considered a regional service. This is assuming we take out the Gulf Islands. With recreation facilities still regional in nature, we could term the new function regionally significant recreation facilities funding, but could no longer refer to the function as regional recreation. That's the central point of what you're trying to get at, Director Smith?
Yes, that is the point that I am trying to get at. Thank you. And the Gulf Islands are exempt from other areas in the CVRD when it comes to budgeting under community parks, parks and trails, and planning. So there is a way of separating the Saltaire area, the exempting the Gulf Islands as it's done in other budgets. So would it be appropriate to make an amendment that Islands Trust Area G Gulf Islands be exempt from the funding of regionally significant recreation facilities? I'm sorry, I'm looking for some help here because
and that's what you're trying to do, and I acknowledge that, and I understand why. And if you want to. I would suggest that the suggested amendment then would be that at the end of the current motion that's before us, that we add the words "and that the Gulf Islands portion of your electoral area be excluded from the regional recreation model." If you want to suggest that amendment, we'll see if we can get a seconder for it.
Yes, I would recommend that amendment. Thank you for that clarification for me.
That's moved and seconded then. Discussion on the amendment. Director Marsh. Director, or Mr. Elzinga wants to say something first.
And just to clarify for the board that the snapshot, the 2019 spreadsheet that is in front of you, and the number of approximately $4,800 that Director Smith referenced would be assigned to the other part of Area G, Saltaire. That's the implication.
Right. Director Marsh.
First, I want to say I really appreciate how much Director Smith has taken Thetis Island into her consideration. It's been refreshing this term. Secondly, I would like to say my kids went to school with the kids from Thetis Island that weren't homeschooled or in the elementary school that used to be there. And all of those kids from Thetis, which aren't many, they're getting less all the time, but they came over and stayed over, and they were in hockey and they were in soccer and they went swimming, and all of those things happen. And I really think that we ought to keep it as it is. It's a fairly insignificant amount. 4,800 is what I believe it is. Is that right, Mr. Elzinga?
That's the number.
Director Smith is shaking her head no. So, Mr. Chair, could I have clarification from Mr. Elzinga or Ms. Weiner?
Mr. Elzinga.
That is the number suggested in a 2019 budget snapshot, approximately as per the attachment F.
Right. So it could go a little up, it could go a little down.
But to be fair to Director Smith, the requisition breakdown in her electoral area means that the actual on-the-ground impact on Thetis will be considerably more than $4,800, correct?
I'd just like to clarify, the Gulf Islands include 9 Gulf Islands. It's not just Thetis Island. There's 9 Gulf Islands. So it impacts all of the Gulf Islands, not just Thetis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Director Marsh, continue.
I'll continue. Yeah, that's a very good point that Director Smith makes. I also have a lot of deep connections on Salt Spring. Many people on Salt Spring come here to do kind of shopping, not your groceries, but the kind of shopping that isn't available to them there. And at those times, they take in the theater, or they may do swimming, or they may do different things. So they don't have major recreational facilities on the Gulf Islands. And when they're using them, I think they may have a pool now on Salt Spring. But I'm just trying to say that I think that so much has gone into this. I mean, if the director wants to take all of that cost onto her own Saltaire taxpayers, I guess that's up to her, but I would caution that that's probably not the most equitable thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. On the amendment, Director Kuhn.
I'm against the amendment, and I have the impression that we're in the process of splitting hairs here. I think the overall purpose of this whole undertaking is to make it as equitable as possible. We can't make it perfect, and this whole effort of trying to make something incredibly perfect will end up just in a schmozzle, and I just don't agree with this.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Acton, on the amendment.
Thank you. I'm going to support this amendment. To me, it's actually, if we're talking about equitable and equality, it seems like it's actually more equitable than spreading the costs around on 9 islands, who obviously they may come once in a while, and so does Langford come once in a while, but we're not asking them for any funds. So I think it's fair enough to allow this amendment. And I just urge everyone to, I think we can continue to have this conversation right now. We don't need to rush people and dismiss their requests. I want to leave this conversation with full agreement. This is a really major decision. And, being an electoral area really sucks. So let's... And you, all of you hear this often. So let's just make sure that our electoral areas are feeling heard, and that our values are represented. So I will support this.
Thank you, Director Acton. Did I see your hand, Director Staples? Go ahead on the amendment.
I just have a clarification question. So this is going to referendum, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So people will have a chance to let everyone know, let their directors know how they feel about this at that point.
Yes, ma'am.
We are a region. This is a regional function. I recognize that there are many different aspects and there's different things about our regions, or about our region, but we still are a region, and this is a regional function. So I can't support this amendment. There's been too much work to get us here, and people will have their say at the ballot on this issue, and they can decide whether they support it or not. And there's going to be things that we're always going to be making decisions when we're doing them regionally, where some areas feel like they're not being represented fully because of different reasons. That's part of the structure of a regional governance, and so that's going to happen. And we're all going to make accommodations for that when we're looking at these issues. So it's not to negate the fact that I recognize, what has been shared so far. It's just that is how we have to, we have to look at it as a region and how it supports the best interests of the region as a whole. And I believe that this does. And there's been so much work done that I cannot support this amendment. And thanks.
Thank you, Director Staples. Not seeing any further hands on the amendment. Director Smith, go ahead.
Just one last time, I'm going to indicate that the usage by the Gulf Islands is equal to 4,000 $805. And if we go with this model under the assessment, it will come out at $66,000 for the Gulf Islands to pay. And if you think that's a usage fair basis, then I'd like to see all of the other areas actually step up and pay that type of funding for usage, because it's not a fair and equitable position to put that area in. So I hope, I'm looking for support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. Seeing no further hands on the amendment, and the amendment being that we add the clause that we take out the Gulf Islands from electoral areas, or Director Smith's electoral area, take that out of the regional recreation model. All in favor of the amendment? And opposed? Please hold your hands while Ms. Harrison does a count. Sorry? It's defeated. Thank you. All right, so back to the main motion, and I had Director Acton on the list to speak to the main motion. Did you have anything to add, Director Acton, or are we ready to call the question?
Well, I would ask this committee for some support in the governance conversation, just and for all electoral areas. We talk so much about our commissions and APCs. Surely we can include a governance piece that allows the electoral areas to keep their commission and to keep that community input that advises the director. We are operating, you yourself, Mr. Chair, have called electoral area directors pseudo mayors, or de facto mayors. So we really value those commissions. And so to take that out of the piece yes, we're regional, but we are forgetting that for electoral areas, the regional model is also our local municipal model. So I think we can have a balance and respect each other's ways that we can actually have equality and community at the same time. So I look to this board to I ask you, what kind of board do we want to be? Do we want to be the board that completely cut the community out of all decisions? No. So I would like to work with this board and for us to leave today on a good note.
I'm going to sort of turn that into a question for Mr. Elzinga, and that is, will there be an opportunity down the line to review and work with the governance model, or is the notion that this is going to be governed by a community services committee or committee of the whole, since we don't have community services anymore, is that pretty much cast in stone if we pass the motion that's before us today?
Mr. Chair, I don't think there's any reason we can't reconsider governance. So the next report is going to talk to reconsideration of a board decision. And so the board has decided to date that the governance of the new model would be a standing committee. But my understanding at this point, I could be corrected by perhaps Ms. Harrison, but my understanding is that we could reconsider governance at any point.
Does that give you some comfort, Director Acton?
No, it doesn't, because when I asked Mr. Elzinga about the question around governance, he did quote the motion and saying it was his understanding. So, I kind of want some clarity around it. Was not my understanding. I don't know if it was everybody else's that we were completely getting rid of the commissions, because we would have heard from the community, first of all. So we didn't report out to that decision. And to me, the governance model was kind of left ambiguous because we couldn't come together on it. So I am not comfortable leaving this conversation without it at least left open to be rediscussed and defined in a motion. And so I ask this board for that.
All right, Director Morrison, I think, may have something to contribute here. We do have a motion on the table right now, I would remind you, but Director Morrison, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that it's really quite simple. I was going to ask that the motion be called, and after the result of the motion, I was going to make a motion that staff be directed to explore a citizen component to the governance of the as we move forward.
All right, I'm going to call the question on the motion that's before us, which is the main motion that the amendment failed. Oh, Director Salmon.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Just barely. Speak loudly, sir.
I just follow up. I think Ms. Weiner was going to get an answer to Director Wilson's questions. Just before we voted, I wondered if she had that
Yeah, she has. I've just come through on the emails.
on the email.
All right. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? And opposed? Director Acton and Smith are opposed. I think that's all I see. So the motion carries. And Director Morrison, you had a supplementary motion?
Yeah, I would move that staff be directed to explore a citizen participation and component of the governance moving forward.
Governance of regional recreation moving forward, for clarity. All right, can that have a seconder? That's seconded.
Clarity on that motion, please, what that means to staff? Because I would like the word commission in there as a model of our commissions, or
Mr. Ozinga, is the motion general enough or specific enough, or does it give you direction?
Mr. Chair, I think it does. What I'm hearing is that one of the options in the report would be the inclusion of commissions, as voiced by Director Acton. So that would be potentially an option in the report. I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that Cowichan Lake Recreation was partitioned or separated, I guess, in this previous motion, and therefore their commission must continue to exist for the purpose of governance over the community halls. So we're going to have to come up with something that works in both areas.
All right, thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Director Morrison.
Mr. Chair, would you mind just repeating the motion again, please?
Director Morrison, could you repeat your motion?
That staff be directed to investigate citizen component of the governance for regional recreation moving forward.
Actually, to prepare a report rather than investigate, yeah.
And if I could just explain the intent.
Sure, speak to
quickly.
your motion, sir.
So clearly, it's very well spelled out in the report about the areas that pay have to contribute. It's clear that we need something in the form of a standing committee of the board. I take Director Acton's point that there is great value in having advice from our citizenry, from our public on matters around these facilities. So I think that staff are pretty good at coming up with a model that will enhance and supplement the work that the future standing committee will have to do, whether the public become in some way part of it or a new model be created. But that's the intent, that we have the ability to tap into our citizen experts and people that are enthusiastic about this work, that staff prepare a report that brings a way forward that we can do that. Thank you.
Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just following up to Director Morrison's citizen input. Is that the same as the Citizen Recreation Advisory Committee? Is that one and the same?
No, I don't believe it is. This would be for the governance, the decisions specifically around these 9 regionally significant recreation facilities. In other words, a vote on whether we're going to put a new roof on the Cowichan Community Center, or whatever. A new chiller at Lake Cowichan. Those kinds of decisions that are made right now by the commissions that govern those, and those decisions are still subject to ratification by the board, but at the commission level we get input from some of the people that are invested in these facilities, and we get input from the participating jurisdictions, be they the electoral areas or the municipalities that actually pay. So that's the current model, and what the motion tries to do and what Director Acton is trying to do is to continue to have that citizen input into that stream of information before it comes to the board.
Thank you.
Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I would turn to Director excuse me, Morrison, if I'm got it wrong, but my understanding is that his motion is that staff would consider any number of options of how the input that's very important from the citizens of each region would be able to be accommodated. Am I correct, Ms. Director Morrison? Yeah, I can support that. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to call the question on this motion. All in favor? And opposed? That motion carries. Okay, it's 10:15. What's the will of the group? I think we should take a break because I suspect the next item, R2, is going to generate considerable discussion as well. So I'm going to call a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 10:20 now. Still buffering. And we're live, 10:25. We are resuming our meeting. Thank you all for your patience. Ms. Harrison, next item on the agenda, R2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item, R2, is a report from the General Manager, Community Services, regarding phasing in of usage-based funding model.
Mr. Elzinga, brief summary.
Very brief, Mr. Chair. The board previously provided direction to phase in the regional recreation usage-based funding model over 3 years. As I'm hoping the board can appreciate, we've gone forward step at a time and seeing what challenges come in front of us. The recent challenges have been when we considered this phasing in model, that it would be a administrative burden, especially on our finance division. As the board could probably appreciate, what we're doing is doubling the amount of work by using 2 different models in a phase-in period. So we've provided options for the board if they would like to reconsider. Option one is the existing decision to do year 1/3 based on apportionment by usage, 2/3 on the existing. Year 2, vice versa, 2/3 on usage, 1/3 on the existing apportionment, and year 3 would be fully implemented. Option 2 is an idea to use one of the different suggested funding models to lessen the administrative burden on finance, where 1/3 would be by usage and 2/3 would be an equal assessment to all residents in the region. So this was discussed a number of years ago as one of the potential funding models and could be implemented in this option. And option 3, of course, is to not phase in. This would be the simplest in terms of the amount of administrative burden on the CVRD staff. And the other important factor in this is options 2 and 3 could allow for the elimination of existing reserve funds for the purpose of returning those reserve funds. Mr. Chair, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Elzinga. I see Director Kuhn.
I move to option 3.
Director Kuhn has moved option 3. Is that a second, Director Acton? No? Director Morrison seconds. So we have the motion on the table. Director Acton, you wanted to speak.
Thank you. Well, as far as Area B goes, nothing really changes for us a lot in dollars amount. So I'm not terribly concerned about this question. What does concern me is I think this decision should be made by the next board. This is creating a false election platform or topic. And I think we should defer this to the next board. It will be a really simple conversation At that point, it will be budget time, and I think that board should be making this decision. So if I had support on referring this back to the, referring this to the next board, I would make that motion.
I'm going to first go to Mr. Elzinga to see what the logistics of that are. Do we have to have the specifics of how this will be funded in place before we hold the referendum?
My understanding, Mr. Chair, is yes. I would look for Ms. Harrison to confirm, but my understanding is the phasing in would have to be included in the language of the service establishment bylaw.
Which means we can't defer to the next board. Ms. Harrison informs me that is correct. Director Salmon and then McGonigal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got quite strong feelings on this. I mean, I think it's important to
Director
realize.
Salmon, can you speak up? We can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Okay. I'll try, but basically, there's a huge hit to the tax. If we look at the attachment Ms. Weiner sent around, we've got up to 20% tax increase from this. Not, and then we have to include the regular tax increase. It'll be at least 5%. So I think it's really important for any chance of success that we at least let it phase in over 3 years. So hopefully you could hear that. So I definitely want a 3-year phasing, probably option 1.
We hear you. Thank you very much. Director McGonigal.
I reiterate what Director Salmon had suggested. When we look at the email from Ms. Weiner, I think it shows the implications towards different areas. Some, again, are winners and some are losers. And I would suggest that a phase-in model for those areas that are significantly impacted would be the best option moving forward. I know it would be an administrative nightmare, but that would be the most equitable suggestion forward, in my opinion.
Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I don't agree with phasing it in, because what it would do in essence, it would prolong the period of time that some of the areas have been paying for services that they never used, and other areas have been benefiting from services that they never paid for. I can't see any purpose of increasing the time frame and thereby having more injustice going on, because this has been going on for a long time, that some areas that have been getting away with murder, they've been using, their residents have been using services that they either never or just slightly paid for it. And I think it has to be sorted out, and it has to be fixed. And if we keep pushing that can ahead and say, well, we'll phase it in over 3 years, it just increases the time frame as to the injustice being carried. I don't agree with it. I think we should just move it.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got an example I want to raise and a question through to staff. When I had a couple of years back gone to my community about a requirement for some debt servicing, staff had put together a package that had given a 20, 25, and 30-year payback horizon. And I think there was a difference between $90 a year for the 30-year horizon and $136 a year for the 20-year horizon. And much to my surprise, my community said that they wanted to just knuckle down, get it done, and chose the $136 option, the 20-year payback time. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that this could be fashioned to have it as part of the referendum question, that we say that, we're putting this question to you, and could we ask the question, is it preferred for our taxpayers to pay it over a 3-year phase-in or a 1-year phase-in? And so I pose that to staff. I don't know if you'd had the question. And of course, I'm hearing what the communities or what the various directors are saying. This is a tough one, but maybe those that are taking the bigger hit, really need the backing of a longer phase-in period. Thank you.
So it's a process question, really, and I see Ms. Mohan has popped up. I was going to go to Ms. Harrison, but Barb, if you've got something to add to this in terms of whether we could make this part of the referendum process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of want to put in context the issue of complexity of the phasing in financial option, because there's a couple of different parts to that. So yes, it's a little more work for staff or significantly more work for staff to do those calculations in each year of the phasing in. But it also, in order to submit the bylaw for provincial review, all of that work has to be done, but basically the method and the impacts to taxpayers have to be sorted so that it can be sent to the province in time for an iterative review that allows them to approve the referendum question prior to us starting to communicate about it and getting it ready for the ballot. So it's not just that it's staff workload that some of it has to happen very quickly right now, and will have an impact on other things that happen for staff. So there's that. Whether or not I'm going to leave it to Ms. Harrison to answer completely, but I suspect phasing in could be part of a referendum question, but it would make it inordinately that much more complicated to draft the bylaw in a timely fashion to be able to be ready for referendum. So I'll let her comment further on that. And the other thing that I wanted to say, and I'll let Ms. Wayner comment further if she requires, is that there is a piece to this that has to do with reserve funding and accessibility of reserve funding and use of reserve funding if we do a phased-in option versus if we do it all in 1 year. So it's not just about staff time. And finally, there's a general question about communicating in a referendum and how complicated do you want to make the question to be for the public to be able to assess and give a response. So those are some additional considerations I'd ask you to think about with respect to the staff recommend or the options that are available for phasing. So, and I invite Ms. Wayner or Ms. Harrison to make additional comments if I've left something out or am I incorrect?
I'm going to go to Ms. Harrison first on the propriety of asking this in the referendum. I mean, what I'm hearing Ms. Mohan say is that we need to have the draft bylaw and the draft question ready, and that the assumption is that the financial model will be built and that it'll either be an all-in-one or a phase-in, but that we have to have that decision made, rather that we can't put that part of it to referendum. You're nodding your head, and your camera's on, but yeah, if you could just sort of elaborate on that a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct in a nutshell. When you go out to referendum to the public, what you have to have is a clear indication for them to see that all that work has been done behind the scenes, and they're answering either yes or no to the adoption of the bylaw as it's presented. If you want to go out to the public and ask them a question about how they prefer that funding, you'd have to also wait and then go back to them with another referendum with a bylaw that has the funding in it. So
that's what I suspected. Thank you. Ms. Wayner, did you have anything to add to what Ms. Mohan gave us?
To the committee, yeah, there is some complications with the reserve funds because reserves have been established by a set group and can only be used for the one asset. So that's where some of the transition could be utilized for capital, but then that offsets who can contribute, who doesn't. It makes it a little bit more complicated as those funds are coming in. Because if, say, CCC utilized capital reserves to offset some of the costs for the budget that year, that also would be potentially giving benefit to others outside of the areas, because the requisition would be brought down by 1/3 for the one, so there's a smaller benefit over the phase-in, but it's definitely a lot of complications because, and the operating reserves, once again, there is the challenge, which with those options that to do the phase all at once, there is the opportunity to close down the functions that aren't used any, and you can do a negative requisition, which pushes back the reserve funds back to the electors to help offset costs, because those electors contributed to the fund. If the old function is closed, the money can go back. But the part that I would make everyone aware of, if those functions are closed for new projects, say a second sheet of ice, there wouldn't necessarily be a reserve fund to be able to go up for the grants and to establish. So the grants are, so the funding through reserves is very complicated.
Thank you, Ms. Weiner. Keeping in mind that we have to be done by 11, preferably before that. I've got a few people on the list, but let's try to keep our comments brief. Director Martman, then Marsh.
Thank you. Questions I have arise out of this. I think the first question I have, because I look at it maybe pretty simply, that we'll go to a referendum, and what I will see Area H will look at and say, you want us to pay that much more money this year, and you want us to say yes? Why would inflation's high? They're going to say, well, I don't think so. So I look at this and I look across. So am I wrong on that? Is that what they're going to see? Maybe correct me on that question.
Well, it'll be what it is. I mean, the financial implications will be spelled out, I think, for each electoral area.
Right.
As part of the information package, not as part of the referendum question.
Right.
It's a general referendum question for the whole region, but yeah.
So Area H will be asked, and they will look at this. And so the next thing, I start to look at the breakdown of by electoral area and by municipality, and it's going to come down to, I'm going to save money, which way will I vote? I'm going to spend money, which way will I vote? So where do the numbers break down on that when you look at the populations of each of those areas that either are, I don't want to use winners and losers, but ones are going to pay more and pay less. Is it 50-50? And if I don't know if we have that number. And then the second question I have that comes out of that is, what is it, a one vote past the post? Is it a 50% plus one to pass on the referendum? Thank you.
Referendum is area wide, and it's 50% plus one. And the board then, I believe, still has the option of backing away if it's like 51% to 49. We always have the option to back away, but it's a 50% plus one vote. Right. As to the other questions, I think Ms. Mohan has some answers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if it's an answer, but I think a significant feature of putting a referendum question to an electorate with the hopes of a good response is the communication campaign that you do in association with that referendum, to make sure that when someone understands that they're signing up for more costs, that they know why, that they know that they perhaps have been a free rider for a number of years, that they know that that's the true cost of the service, et cetera. So there's a significant communications campaign that would be anticipated in advance, in association with putting a referendum question together. And in order to do that properly, we need time. Like we actually need the lead time to put it together and to get the public educated on the question. So the decisions that you make today are important because they affect our timeline and how much time we have to communicate properly what the board wants the public to know around this question. So that's really what I wanted to relate. And Mr. Elzinga might have an answer to the sort of what's the, who are the winners and losers kind of synopsis, but I think it relates to how you choose to communicate the information around this for the public in the most simple, straightforward way you can, so that they can make an informed decision. So.
Mr. Elzinga?
Well, the first thing I'll say with my recreation hat, Mr. Chair, is that those that use facilities more are winners, but I'll put that out. Then directly to Director Martin's question, we anticipate an extensive communication campaign, potentially July through September, area by area. So we would identify the impact for each individual jurisdiction.
All right, Director Marsh, then Smith, and then hopefully we can call the question. Oh, Director Nicholson, didn't see you. Go ahead. Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know when we're thinking about tax dollars, winners and losers does feel like a good phrase. However, for myself, when I'm thinking about the province's encouragement for all regional districts to have a regional growth strategy, which we do not have, and we attempted that with the Couch in 2050, I think we would want to make our messaging more about equity when we go out to the public. And I just think it's important to realize that some of the centers, particularly, and I don't want to offend anyone, but particularly Duncan and North Cowichan, who have been carrying one of these facilities quite a bit, we're also carrying the largest burden of the challenge of the housing crisis and the homeless population and the people who are tragically stuck in substance abuse disorder. So I think it's an equity thing. And I also want to remind myself, and that's what I did as I thought about these, because this I would have chosen too. Staff are professional. They know what they can handle. They know what the best thing to do is. And we've already got a lot of stuff we're going to do on the budget even before the election. And all of this is going to weigh a lot on the finance department. And we know that we're not fully staffed. So I do support this motion for the reasons that have been said and for the reasons I just said. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Director Smith and Nicholson. Director Smith?
No, did Director Marsh pass? I didn't notice.
Director Marsh just spoke. It's your turn, then Director Nicholson.
Oh, okay, thank you. I kind of take offense to the word free rider for years. I don't think that a lot of the electoral areas or other areas were included in the decisions to take out loans or build the facility. So you aren't really a free rider if you haven't had that brought forward to you to make a financial decision. We all know that the Aquatic Center in under North Cowichan went ahead without applying for grants. So I think that it's really important that electoral areas will be totally run over with North Cowichan and the City of Duncan population for voting. So, coming out to all the electoral areas and saying, now this is your usage and you need to pay for usage, and we'll all agree, yes, we need to pay for usage. But as for going to a referendum on it, it's just going to be the winners and the losers, and people are just going to be really disappointed because they don't really feel that their voice will be heard if they're in an electoral area. When you consider that, I think electoral areas add up to about 33,000 of the 84,000. So there is definitely going to be a disheartening part of that. But I do think that saying free rider for years is inappropriate, and I wouldn't want to say to my community, you've been a free rider, when they've actually paid a user fee at the door that's been asked of them. So I think that we have to be really cautious, because a lot of people didn't have, a lot of taxpayers didn't have a say in those facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. Director Nicholson, hopefully to close. Oh, Ms. Mohan first.
Thank you, Director Smith. I'll withdraw the use of the term. You're absolutely right. I used the term in relation to the usage study, which was showing that the funding model, like the funding right now, is not distributed equitably according to the usage study, and the usage study is what the board chose as their method. So I apologize if I offended anyone with the use of the term free rider, and certainly I won't be in charge of the communications campaign. So we will make sure we communicate carefully about it when we go to the public, for sure.
We won't use those words. Thank you, Director Nicholson, to close.
Thank you. I think this is a really important issue, and I really would like to see it be successful. So I am, I think option 3 obviously is the simplest and the easiest for people to understand. I don't think it would be a stretch for people to get their heads around phasing in, though. So I have 2 questions. One is about option 2. Is it administratively as challenging as option 1 is going to be? And then my second question is, why did you not provide an option that was a 2-year phase-in?
To staff. Mr. Elzinga.
Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Weiner should probably answer the first question, and I'll just take a stab at the second question. There's multiple options that we could have provided, whether it was 2 years or 4 years. We brought the phase-in option of 3 years to the board's attention approximately 2019.
Ms. Weiner, on the other question.
Through the chair, to Director Nicholson, going with the regional assessment is slightly easier. The most complicated option is the 3-year phase-in with utilizing the old functions. The next, from that, the least difficult is 1 year. So the middle of the road is the option where you're using the regional assessment.
So if I may follow up, I think for this to be successful for the most people, I mean, I suspect given the numbers, hopefully if North Cowichan and Duncan get out and vote, it will be successful. But I think it would be helpful for the electoral areas who are facing large increases to understand that it's going to be phased in. And I think I would prefer like a quick phase in, like a 2-year phase in using option 2 to make it easiest on staff. So that would be my preference, I think, at this point.
All right, thank you. Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. I really think we don't want to rush this one. I mean, this was a phase-in, a 3-year phase-in was part of what we agreed to when we went ahead with this back in 20.
I can't hear Director Salmon. Can you turn up your volume on your computer?
There's a setting under audio and video for your microphone, and speaker. If you hit audio and video, speaker and microphone settings, and then turn the volume up on your microphone. The input level.
Is that better?
There you go. Now we can hear you.
All right. Thank you. Good, because I think it's really important. I don't want to rush this. I mean, we want it to succeed, I assume. And when we approved this back in 2020, a 3-year phase-in was part of the deal. And I think it's vital for success because if you look at, I just, based on Natalie's thing, I think everybody should have a good look at that. I mean, C and E, we're up 8%. That's area C and E. Area A and H is up 9%. Area G is up 12%. Lake Cowichan up 20%. That does not count our normal, at least 5% requisition increases. So you can imagine, and that's about half the population, if I got it right, just those southern areas include Area B, which is up 5. So I mean, I think we have to stick to a 3-year phase-in, and people will do the numbers, and that was the agreement. That's what I certainly won't support doing this all in 1 year and have a massive tax increase.
Councillor Marsh, have you got something new? Otherwise, I'd like to call the question. Go ahead. Something new.
I just want to clarify, based on what Director Salmon just said, if in some area it's a 20% increase, I understand. It's my understanding it's a 20% increase in that function, not a 20-year or 20% overall increase in their tax bill. Am I correct, Ms. Weiner? Through the chair to you.
Ms. Weiner?
Or Mr. Elzinga, whoever knows. Ms.
Sorry,
Mohan.
the video versus the mute there for a second. Through the chair to Director Marsh. Yeah, that's overall requisition for the area. That's total requisition. That's not just for the function. So that 20% increase is a total requisition increase.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
So then I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, or I don't even know if it's in order, but I did say that 2 was my preference. So we've got 3 on the table, but I think it'd be interesting just to hear from everybody if we had a consensus or.
We've heard from everybody, or most people that want to speak. I mean, the option here, and I don't want to prejudge where you're going, but I think where you're going is you'd prefer option 2. Well, if that's the will of the board, then or the committee, then we vote down option 3. Somebody move option 2, and we vote on that. We are running very short on time, so.
Yeah, I'll just end. I know that you're not trying to speak for me. What I prefer is that we all feel good when we walk away. That's all. But I'm prepared to vote on this one. Thank you.
Fair enough, thank you. I'm going to call a question on the motion before us that it be recommended to the board that the proposed new usage-based funding model for the 9 regionally significant recreation facilities be implemented in 1 year rather than being phased in over 3 years as previously approved.
Point of order.
Yes?
Since this has been previously passed by the board, just wanted to make sure that this is in order, because we are now making a resolution to change a previous direction.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this is committee, you'll notice the first sentence in the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board. So when this committee recommendation comes before the board, it is entirely appropriate for the board to reconsider.
All right. So to the question, all in favor? And opposed? Please keep your hands up if you're opposed. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, R3. Ms. Harrison.
Just point of clarification, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you're interested in recommending that item R3 in the open session and closed session item CSR1 be forwarded to the board.
I think that would be a good idea.
So
just
moved.
in terms of the timing. So that's been moved and seconded. Thank you. All in favor? And opposed? Director Toporowski, I'm sorry, I thought you were seconding or something. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification on the numbers of the last vote. I just seen some people counting, so I was just wanting to know who was in favor and who wasn't in favor, like not just the numbers. Thank you.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was 8 in favor, 7 opposed.
All right, so with that, it is 10:55. We reconvene for hospital board in 5 minutes. Motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor. See you in 5 minutes, different login.
Mr. Chair, I won't be there for the hospital board.